wanted to just because Scott brought up Donnie Darko, and that is a film that I really, really love. And that one also gets debated whether it's horror or not. And like I personally would say, yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's another one of those interesting ones. And that one really plays to, there is like some kind of of like a paranormal sort of thing going on, right? It's like you don't really fully understand why this like weird, time situation is happening.
Right.
It's very post-Lent kind of movie.
Yeah.
Absurdist and surreal, and you're not really sure what's the hell's going on.
The alternate ending definitely looks like horror.
Yes, it does. Also mental illness in horror is another interesting thing, because in Donnie Darko in particular, it's the fact that he's presumed to be mentally ill because of all of the things that he's seeing. It's like treated like hallucinations and all that, but like, is it real or isn't it? And like for me, I don't have hallucinations. That's not something I've really experienced in my life, other than when I have like a crazy fever. But in my day-to-day, I don't. But like schizophrenia runs in my family. So I spent my teenage years and my 20s basically being like, please don't start seeing things. Please don't start hearing things. Oh my God. And if I started wondering and questioning that was terrifying. So for me, like all the psychological stuff in horror films, dealing with like mental illness and stuff, very, very scary. And even just the horror of like being a person living with depression and anxiety. It's like,
well, that was like I was saying last week about how In the Mouth of Madness is just so terrifying because of all this. You're seeing all these strange things and you don't know if they're real or not.
Yeah.
Well, I think the mental illness and horror trope was pretty much done definitively many years ago. Repulsion comes to mind, 1965. To me, that out Hitchcock's any Hitchcock movie. Just no offense to Hitchcock, but it's just to me, it's like, it's not like Psycho. Okay, he's crazy, he's mentally ill. It's like she's really losing the grip on everything, and we're seeing it play out, and we don't know it's real sometimes. And those kind of movies are scary, and there was a period where a lot of those movies were made with female protagonists, and the whole old school thing is the woman crazy, is she hysterical, whatever.
The yellow wallpaper.
I mean, but
I would think like Bill Paxton's Frailty is another really good.
I love that movie. I absolutely love that film.
I mean, it's a horrifying movie, and it's mental illness and it's just a whole mess.
It's the only thing watching that film makes me sad, because I realized when we lost Bill Paxton, we didn't just lose a really good actor who just was good in everything he did. We really lost a good creator, because he could have brought a lot more. And it's such a well-made film and such a simple premise, just well executed. Love it. Anyway, I got to run off, but you guys all take care. Hope you guys go out. Have a nice, safe Halloween. Okay.
Yeah, safe Halloween, everybody.
Take care.
Take care, Bill. Rock
Bye-bye.
on. All right, the Sensational Six, and Norma Bingal is six. So I'm going to look real quick here behind this screen. There is one. There's the one that Kaelyn did. I screenshotted that. Yeah, I think we've covered most of yours.
The only thing we haven't really talked about that I had asked is like just examples of films that aren't intended to be horror, but are actually terrifying. And like for me in particular, what I think of is like, it's insane to me now seeing like kids movies that are made today versus the ones that were made in like the 80s and 90s, because God, they pulled no punches back then. A lot of the movies I grew up with, I look back on and I'm just like, wow, no wonder I'm as messed up as I am. Like,
a lot of movies that are disturbing that I call horror. They're not scary, but they're deeply disturbing, and they're usually extreme. And I consider all those movies under horror. And for a whole generation now, they're a big part of horror. But I mean,
Return to Oz
is what now?
Return to Oz is a good example.
I mean,
Return to Oz, and that's not an extreme or disturbing one, but
not
it's
just
disturbing
the
to kids.
wheelies, but Mombi is just terrifying with her removable head and all of that. It's just it's a very scary movie.
Yeah.
Well, my benchmark was the Phil originally. I've expanded out and I think Scott's was too. The Phil Hardy Encyclopedia of Horror, and he puts a lot of ones in there that I didn't think were horror, but I listened to his case and I wrote a few down. One was Heather's, because it is a remake of Massacre at Central High, which is pretty squarely horror, and it has murders, it has dark things, obviously satire, humor, but it can marginally be in the horror. I tend to lump it there. Another one he mentions, which I thought was incredible because I just seen it recently when I bought that book, was The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That movie has this sense of dread every frame, because that the husband is an absolute psychotic maniac, and if he catches them having an affair, the most horrible thing's going to happen, and eventually horrible things happen. And to me,
when I first saw it, I thought I'd never want to watch this again, and then 10 years later I watched it again intentionally.
What was your question, Kaelyn?
I was going to say, speaking of that, one of the plot points in Twin Peaks that absolutely terrified me the most was the affair going on between was it Nancy and Jonathan, I think were their names, the two kids, Leo, the guy who was abusive and
was the abusive husband.
Shelley, thank you.
Shelley,
yeah, but nothing ever came of that.
Nothing ever came of it, but the entire time it was going on, I was
threat.
just like, please don't catch them.
But that was the terrifying
character.
Leo was so scary. You're right, because
Leo
was scary.
That we were terrified that they were going to do something and get caught. And
but then he got neutralized, and then the fear was, is at any minute he gonna snap back and kill them.
Yeah.
And you could tell that I was the concern of Bobby's even more than of Shelley's. But also Bobby reveled the fact that now I'm his caregiver, motherfucker. But then but at that time we didn't even know how evil Leo was until we see Fire Walk with Me. He's one of the ones who's
he's even worse.
He's even worse than we thought.
The chick that was with Laura.
Yeah. God, I hate Leo.
Let's go back to that.
Sorry.
Actually, no, go and finish, because I did want to bring up another.
I'm finished. I mean, that's a very good point.
I wanted to bring up one. Okay, I wanted to bring up one point about the kids' movies that Kaelyn was talking about. Some of them from the earlier decades were actually, they had scary elements. If you think about Disney's Snow White or
the original one. Yeah,
the original, and
that's a good movie.
And Fantasia,
Fantasia definitely.
Night on Bald Mountain and Fantasia.
Night on Bald Mountain.
Terrified me and traumatized me
about that too.
Oh, that was scary.
And also, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. If any,
the child catcher is the thing of nightmares. Yeah.
Oh, is it the child catcher? Oh, okay.
The other one for me.
Ian Fleming wrote that.
Oh yeah. But the idea that as a kid, that with his nose and he's sniffing out children. It goes back to the old hag witch folklore, basically, with this guy putting them in the to capture the children, to seduce them into the carriage, and all that. Man, he is just super creepy. Creepy.
The scariest animated movie of my childhood is The Brave Little Toaster. I'm not even afraid of clowns, but the clown in
that's
that
a great film.
Movie,
it really is.
Oh, did not like that.
I remember the Mad Doctor and Scooby-Doo. That was the only one I think that was frightening.
Wait, which one? What about Scooby-Doo?
The Mad Doctor, and that was out.
Oh yeah.
I'm gonna have to bring the mood way down since we're on the kids stuff, because there's one I wanted to talk about that is to me, most horror fans accept squarely as horror, but sometimes they go case by case, and some, I think, they're horror that are progenitors of this subgenre, and that's the ever popular rape revenge subgenre, which is, I admit, is one of my very favorites. And I do like testing my limits with it, not because I like seeing women raped, but I do like seeing rapists being destroyed. So, and for instance, when I finally got a copy of, not finally, but when I got a copy of I Spit on Your Grave on DVD several years later, I got married and my wife was into horror movies, and, we would she would watch the same ones over and over again. Not bad movies, but I was always trying to find different stuff. But she's like, yeah, let's watch Poltergeist for the 80th time, comfort food. So, but then when we had friends over, suddenly she was like, hey, Henry, let's show him something really freaky, you know. And I'm like, I'm good at that. And so we put on I Spit on Your Grave, and her friends that were female, they fucking loved it. They adored it.
I was actually shown I Spit on Your Grave by one of my best friends, women my age. That's how I found those movies as well. And we watched both of them like back to back, actually, the original and the remake. Terrifying, really hard to watch.
The
Loved
first
every
one is
second
really
of everything post that beginning lead-in part. Yeah, they're
the
brilliant.
20-minute period where the whole rape happens. I mean,
and
the
also
way
just how excessively long that was. I was just like,
almost real time. Yeah, and also another brilliant thing they did is no music.
Yeah.
No music in the movie except when she plays the record. You want to scare
the shit out of people? Just cut the music.
Yeah.
Music is comfort sometimes. Like, music can be used to make things scarier, but the absence of music makes things more real. And it's just like, oh no, we're serious right now.
Well, I want to mention a couple in that subgenre that a lot of horror fans tend to like, and then sometimes they argue over. One is Thriller, A Cruel Picture, or Thriller Ein Grimm film from Sweden, and that's from 1973. So that's the one that in America was called They Call Her One Eye. So Christina Lindberg was like a Swedish nymphette, you know, softcore porn actress and model. And so they cast her in this movie, you know, very much a very dark film. But it's an action film, really, and it's a revenge film, but it's so dark that it definitely has that tinge to it. And she's become an iconic character. Her character's name was Madeline, but also she was known as Frigga. And the reasoning behind that is that, basically she gets molested as a kid by some weird guy drooling black shit out of his mouth. And then she gets traumatized and never speaks again. Then when she's a teenager, she gets kidnapped by this smooth talking dude. He turns out to be a pimp, and he prostitutes her out to people. And then when she tries to escape, he gouges her eye out, and it's up close. It's an animal eye, just like on Shen Andalou. So it's shocking in that level. Also, this movie used hardcore porn inserts. They weren't her having the sex, but, you know, the genital parts. And there are versions with and without. My argument, I mean, I'm open to people who don't want to see that version, but I think if you see that version, she's more degraded, so that when you get to the revenge, it's even more powerful, because then you remember, oh yeah, that guy did, you know. But basically, she takes this money. He gets her addicted to heroin, and then she takes this money and starts saving it. She'll go into town, and he's getting a little more permissive. And when she goes into town, first of all, she's gradually kicking the heroin. Also, she's training. She learns how to drive really fast and crazy. She learns how to shoot firearms. She knows how to make literally saw off a shotgun, and she does it in real time. That's awesome. Kung Fu, of course, is the 70s. And finally, Frigga is now this character because Frigga has the patch. So, of course, Frigga was Odin's wife, and Odin had the one eye. So Frigga, you know, her basic idea was ripped off by Quentin Tarantino for that character Ellie Driver in Kill Bill, who's a very inferior character and actress. But yeah, I mean, sorry, that's just the truth. I mean,
those are some strong opinions.
Well, Daryl hated it. Daryl hated it because Quentin made her watch the movie I'm talking about. She said, "Oh, you want me to be in a porno? That sucks." And I'm like, why are you an airhead, or why are you blonde? Are you really blonde? I mean, you know, but she did it anyway, and I don't think she did a very good job, but she did bring that figure. But the real figure is much more interesting because she has darker hair. She's a long black leather duster. You'll never forget her. The sawed-off shotgun, and no hint of her body or sexuality. Totally desexualized and all black. And she just starts fucking these guys up. And she doesn't just fuck them up. Like, if they're people that she had to service, like a couple times, like a threesome, she'll get to their house and she'll just kill the whole fucking family. And finally, when she's on the way to the pimp who did this to her, he's got some thugs. Of course, they're in a warehouse, and they do this wild stylization. Like, she starts shooting, and they do it in slow motion, but it's like 3 times slower than standard slow motion. So it's like, you know, it's surreal. And so then when the squib hits, it's like slowly bursting and they're slowly falling. So some people don't like it or think it's comical. I think I don't want to say it's powerful, like incredible, but for action movie, yeah, it's powerful, especially in the context of the character, because she's just blowing these people away, and in slow motion, it makes it more surreal. And then she gets revenge on the guy, and it's pretty grisly and well deserved, and goes about her way. And so Frigga is kind of had become a exploitation iconic character, and that's why Tarantino wanted to do an homage or whatever you call it to her. But then years later, after I Spit on Your Grave, that was before I Spit on Your Grave. So a few years after I Spit on Your Grave, Abel Ferrara did Ms. 45. So again, most people squarely consider this a horror movie, but it is mainly action, revenge, rape, revenge. But the horror elements are obviously the rape itself is a horror element to me, and the violence, the level of retribution. And the thing about this character is she's already deaf. No, she's not deaf. She's a mute, and she gets raped twice in one day, and then he kills the second guy with an iron, the iron clothes with. And then she keeps his 45 caliber gun, his ammunition. And she also constructs this kind of look about herself, like all black, like an angel of death. And she stalks in the night. And basically she's killing any male that she thinks is out of line. Not just, guys who try to rape her or whatever, but I mean, like thugs in the street. She'll just blow them away. I mean, one guy starts running after her because she left her bag. He's not a rapist or threat at all. He comes up to her and she just blows him away. And she doesn't seem all that repentant about it. And to the point where even she wants to kill her neighbor's yelping dog, who's a male dog. She even takes it and kidnaps it, tries to get rid of it.
It's like so done.
It does survive, but the shootout at the end is inappropriate to this. It's a Halloween party, and she's dressed as a nun. And before she goes out into the party, she blesses all the bullets with kisses and loads her thing up, and she's going to kill every man there. And again, drone music comes in, everything goes into slow motion. It's amazing shots. And then a woman that she knows that she works with takes a knife off the table of food, stabs her in the back. And now, mind you, this character has been mute the whole movie. And she turns around and she goes, "Sister." So, it's like she would never hurt a woman. Why would a woman do this to her? It's like the ultimate betrayal. And she speaks, and also her name is Thana, death. So, but it was shot in New York, low budget, just coming off of him doing Driller Killer. But before he started doing more quote respectable movies like King of New York and stuff. But it's very gritty, but it's very well done. It has a lot of horror tropes, and it kind of messes with the audience sometimes. Like if she's looking in the mirror after the rape and she's starting to undress, and like right when they get to the button, it cuts. And, I didn't think anything of it, but I read in Danny Perry's Cult Movies book that, some people were like, "Oh, wait, hold on. Now I feel bad because I was wanting to see her nipple, but she's not right." Like fucks with the mind of who's watching it, But those are some infamous ones in that subgenre. And again, like I said, they've been I think ultimately they all kind of land in horror. There was a French one called Revenge recently. They became kind of well known on the art house circuit. It played here briefly. It was pretty good. I bought the Blu-ray and I didn't really like it as much the second viewing, but it was very much in that vein. Rosario Dawson did a movie called Descent that was in this exact lineage, and they even asked the director of that movie, "Did you like I Spit on Your Grave?" And she's like, "I've never seen it." And Rosario's like, "She's lying," And I saw that in Charlotte. Rosario screened it. And Rosario screened it in Charlotte, and that didn't go well for the comic book convention owner because he's a Christian. He's like, "Don't let any kids anywhere near this door, Rosario." And it was basically like 30 of us, and one of them was Peter David, the famous comic book writer, and he loved it. And we all loved it, really. I mean, we thought it was interesting. It doesn't necessarily stand with repeated viewings. It's very kind of muted, very slow burning. The revenge part is gross, but it's and it's not what you'd expect, and it's kind of convoluted, but it also plays with the idea of the sexuality of the guy who raped Rosario Dawson, but because basically they tie him up and they make she makes a friend of hers, a very muscular black DJ guy, rape him. And so it's that whole closeted gay, you know, revenge, you know, it's got all these layers, and it gets really filthy near the end. But I don't own a copy anymore, but it's just one of those ones where they're still trying to find ways to put the spin on it. This is right before those I Spit on Your Grave remakes. So I've seen all three of those, and I like and dislike things about each one of them, to varying degrees, you know. But
what I would think, based on what you've been describing, is that these are like, it's almost, we'd have to almost maybe envision a Venn diagram with horror in one circle and rape revenge, and where there's like this overlap. And for me, where I think where they're not, neither one of them is purely one or the other, but where that overlap is, that's kind of, I would put them in that little part, the grindhouse.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Because that's you know, I like what you're describing. I don't think of in terms of horror, but I can see where there's some overlap with horror, you know. But I think they fall solidly into the grindhouse, which I think encompasses horror and those
exploitation movies.
Yeah, there you go.
But I do think what makes them horror tinged is especially the first couple that I described, is that a lot of extreme imagery, violent imagery, you know, graphic rape, obviously not graphic like hardcore sex.
Yeah, I think that's where the overlap comes. Yeah, is there?
Yeah, and that's where that, you know, whereas the rest of the movies, you could say they play out as just like Death Wish revenge. Except they're more violent than Death Wish movies. You know, I mean, I Spit on Your Grave, of course, is way more grisly, and you know, well deserved. But that was one. And I was gonna say, so I mentioned the Phil Hardy book. Yeah, there were some movies like Cook the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover. That's very artsy, and it has the feeling of dread, and it does have extreme gore toward the end. And it also has an EC Comics like ending, because, you know, live by the sword, die by the sword. So the guy, you know, he owns the gangster owns the restaurant, and he eats and eats and eats, you know. And so basically when he kills her lover, you guys seen this movie?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
you haven't ever seen it, Francis?
No, not this one.
No.
Well, they make him eat. They cook up the lover and make the gangster eat him. See, that was how he reacted. That was exactly what he did.
She tries to get him to eat his private parts, but he won't do that. He
because he goes crazy when he finds out about their affair, and he's like, "I'll kill him and eat him. I'll kill him and eat him." And so then they get
Michael Gambon.
Huh?
Michael Gambon.
Michael Gambon.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's the first thing I saw him in. I was like, I don't know if I want to see him anything else. He's scary as shit. Harry Potter.
Good actor.
Yeah, like when I saw the Harry Potter, I had seen him in the Cook the Thief, His Wife and Her Lover, and Toys, where he's a crazy military general. It was like they cast this guy as Dumbledore.
Yeah. And Helen Mirren, you know.
Helen Mirren, and of course, you know, Helen Mirren's maxim the show. He says, I'm fine with nude scenes. I love nude scenes.
Oh yeah,
I don't care. And they're of course totally nude. But Peter Greenaway's movies have several things in common. They always have
nudity is a
violence.
part of them.
Yeah, nudity is part.
What? Well, yeah, nudity, sex, and violence, but they're.
He came and spoke at Butler University in Indianapolis, and there was one guy who said, "I was an extra in Prospero's books. Do you remember me?"
well, my point being is that Peter Greenaway's movies are consummately made. They're some of the most well-made movies I've ever seen. And he designs everything himself. He always has that traveling left to right pan. You know, he has the sets that, and like in Cook the Thief, they change color as they go into different rooms. You know, they're super detailed. Prospero's books is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, because John Gielgud plays it straight as Prospero, but then they interpret all the other stuff as this alchemical, magical stuff, and it's just like, whoa, man, you know. And I've seen a few of his other movies, and Cook the Thief, I think, is his most emotional, his least clinical. It's the one where you feel emotional connection to Helen Mirren and her boyfriend's characters, and to some of the other supporting characters, like the little boy, and so that makes it more horrific, you know, and more dreadful, because you're like, what is he going to do
Roth
to them?
Is the comic relief in the film.
Who is? Yeah,
Tim Roth.
Yeah.
Henry, I have to go now.
Okay, well, it was nice seeing you.
Bye, Francis.
All of you guys.
Francis.
Thank you. Come back to see us.
Bye.
Right, bye.
Take care now. So the last, I don't know if I had anything else. Oh, well, other like sci-fi horror hybrids. A good one, David Cronenberg. So he had a string of early movies. So, you've got The Rabid and The Brood and Scanners and Videodrome. Did I miss one?
The
Shivers.
The Fly also.
The Fly, yes.
Fly. You might count Dead Ringers in there as a horror.
Yeah, I would count Dead Ringers as horror, but I don't consider it a crossover
with any
other genre.
Yeah, it's not
sci-fi, but it is drama. It's him starting to go into more drama where he went, but I love Dead Ringers. But yeah, The Fly is kind of the last of his sci-fi horror ones, and it's very blatantly both, I think, but the early ones kind of like Shivers and Rabbit have more of a horror vibe to them. Mm-hmm. But Scanners has some horror, has some action, has a lot of cerebral science fiction, which he's great at writing. And then Videodrome, I guess, is where he brings it all together. Yeah. And to me, that's kind of that's his seminal original work that he came out of his head and he wrote it. And it communicates so much stuff, and so much of it is prescient and prophetic to the times we live in now. But it's squarely horror and it's squarely science fiction. So, absolutely. Yep. But yeah, brilliant movie. But I also slot Videodrome in with movies that aren't necessarily horror, but movies that I call like prophetic media kind of movies, like Facing the Crowd, Network, even Cannibal Holocaust, all the way down to a movie like Nightcrawler with Jake Gyllenhaal, where you've got the guy who's got to get the shot at any cost, and and he's just crazy, and it's about the media sensationalization. But that's a whole nother kind of quirky subset I like. But does anybody else have any more commentary that they would like to add, since we are now losing our cast gradually?
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up.
It's like we're being picked off like in a horror movie.
We are.
But that's every week.
They got Francis. Oh no!
Okay, no! Does this make me the final girl?
Oh, I was gonna say that there are just some things that are just like the things like they're I wouldn't call them horror at all, but they're like vaguely disturbing. And like there's the first time I really love this one. I've seen it several times. It was not well received, and it's very hard to see. It's called The Phoenix. It was made by Konichi Kawa with animation by Osamu Tezuka, and was based on his graphic novel series.
That. Yeah, I remember the graphic novel.
At the end of there's this couple, and they shouldn't have even been a couple, but it's like this guy knows that blue mold can cure illness, and they make him marry this woman. And of course that has a subtitle that says blue mold contains penicillin, which of course wasn't discovered in modern times until the 20th century. But this is set in like it's set in the 3rd century, and it's at the time of Queen Hinako, who was the legendary queen who supposedly died.
Now, let me ask you this: is this a live action or an anime?
It's live action. It has been remade as an anime. But there are some animated sequences in it.
Konichi Kawa, who fires on the plane. That's and that's a hell of a pedigree. What year did that come out?
1978.
Wow, I've got to find a copy of that. Go ahead.
Yeah, it stars Tomi Saburo Wakayama has a major role, and Tetsuya Naganai has a major role. But there's a scene where they end up trapped at the bottom of this pit, and their baby dies, and the woman just drops it, and that just kind of freaks me out because she realizes it's dead. She just drops it, and somehow they get enough food in there that they end up having another kid, and the kid gets raised at the bottom of the pit, and he decides when he comes of age that he's going to climb out of this pit with a couple of knives, and he's like he's climbing up out of this pit, and it's like just fear of heights. There's that aspect, and he's up there, and eventually gets to the point where he's gonna fall off until the Phoenix comes by and says, you have to live, you have to, and eventually climbs out. But there's this disturbing moment where his mother talks about how she's sick and dying, and he didn't even realize it, and that just really freaked me out because he's promising to come back and she's like sick and dying, and he doesn't even realize it. And that freaked me out, especially the first time I saw it.
You know what that reminds me of? It's a crazy thought, but it could very well be true. Do you think Christopher Nolan saw this movie? Because you're describing the origin of Bane in Dark Knight Rises very closely.
I didn't even think about that, but you're not wrong.
Because that's not